Have you ever wondered why, despite cutting salt, your blood pressure just won't budge? Before you point the finger at your dinner plate, pause for a moment and consider this. Right now, at this exact second, your heart is pumping blood through an astonishing 60,000 miles of vessels inside your body. You didn't tell it to do this. You didn't even feel it happen. It just works automatically constantly without your conscious thought. And right now, your kidneys are quietly making a decision. They are choosing whether to hold on to sodium or release it. That single unseen action happening inside you right this moment shapes your blood pressure far more than the sprinkle of salt on your food ever could. Most people assume that high blood pressure is about what they eat. They cut salt, check nutrition labels obsessively, avoid restaurants, and refuse the foods they love, only to step on a blood pressure monitor and see barely any change. If that feels familiar, what I'm about to share could be the most important insight you gain about your heart this year. Stick with me, because this will completely change how you think about your blood pressure. I'm Dr. Megan Foster, and I spent over 2 decades in surgical practice treating patients with vascular disease and stubborn, resistant hypertension. These weren't people ignoring advice, they were following conventional wisdom perfectly. They cut sodium, took their medications on time, and tracked every label. Yet their blood pressure stayed stubbornly, frustratingly high. Year after year, I saw the same pattern. And what I realized is this. The medical conversation around blood pressure was stuck in a narrow lane sodium. Sodium does affect blood pressure, absolutely, but it is rarely the root cause of chronic, persistent hypertension. Yes, sodium can cause a temporary spike. If a person with sensitive blood pressure eats a salty meal, their numbers might rise for a few hours. That is real. But if your blood pressure stays elevated day after day, week after week, even after cutting sodium, that tells us something deeper is broken. The real problem isn't what you're consuming. The problem is how your body is regulating what you consume. And the hidden drivers of that failure are metabolic. They happen in your hormones, minerals, and blood chemistry, not on your plate. Think back 10 or 15 years. Did you worry about sodium on food labels? Did you feel anxious about a pinch of salt in your meal? Probably not. Most people ate freely, seasoned their food, and their blood pressure stayed relatively fine. Something changed, though not your salt shaker, but your internal environment. The systems that once handled sodium quietly and efficiently began to struggle. That strain built up over time until it showed up as elevated numbers on a cuff. This isn't inevitable aging or bad luck. It's a regulatory system under stress from identifiable and addressable causes. Here's the hopeful part. High blood pressure isn't permanent. It's rarely random. It's almost always the result of small, compounding metabolic stresses. And if something has specific causes, it can also have specific solutions. Solutions that target the real drivers, not just symptoms. The problem is that the right targets rarely get the attention they deserve. Millions work hard to manage their blood pressure, cutting salt, tracking numbers, taking meds, yet see little change. That's because they're aiming at the wrong target. So, let me show you how it really works. Picture your bloodstream as a network of pipes, valves, and pressure points, all connected. Sodium is like a magnet for water. The more sodium, the more water enters the pipes, and more water means higher pressure. That's why sodium gets so much attention. But here's the key. In a healthy body, your kidneys act as pressure release valves. When sodium rises, the kidneys filter out the excess, water follows, and pressure returns to normal. Moderate sodium? No problem. The body handles it beautifully. Now imagine those valves getting sluggish, not broken, just slow. Sodium lingers, water stays longer, and pressure stays elevated day after day. That chronic elevation wears arteries, strains the heart, and shows up as high readings not because you ate too much salt, but because the release valve stopped functioning properly. What makes that valve sluggish? There are 4 hidden metabolic drivers. And if you understand these, everything about high blood pressure starts to make sense. Let's start with the first hidden driver, magnesium deficiency. Most people think magnesium only matters for muscle cramps or sleep. And yes, those connections exist. But the role magnesium plays in blood pressure is far more fundamental. Magnesium is essential for producing nitric oxide, a molecule your body makes to tell blood vessels to relax. When blood vessels receive that signal, they widen slightly. Wider vessels mean blood flows with less resistance, and less resistance translates directly into lower blood pressure. Think of it like a garden hose. If you pinch the hose in the middle, pressure builds up behind the pinch. Release it, and pressure eases immediately. Magnesium is what keeps that pinch from forming in your blood vessels in the first place. Without enough magnesium, vessels remain in a state of mild but chronic constriction. Not drastically narrow, not alarming at first glance, but enough to keep blood pressure consistently elevated over months and years. This isn't just theory. Numerous large, well-designed studies show that when magnesium is supplemented in people who are deficient, there are measurable reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Each study shows modest changes individually. But here's the key. Magnesium works in concert with the other three hidden drivers we'll discuss. Address them all together, and the effects add up significant, real, and clinically meaningful. So why are so many people low in magnesium today? The answer is simple. Modern diets. Magnesium is abundant in leafy greens, legumes, nuts, seeds, and whole grains foods many people no longer eat consistently. Instead, diets are built around convenience foods, processed snacks, white bread, and fast food, which deliver little magnesium. A common mistake is assuming a daily multivitamin covers the gap. In reality, most standard multivitamins contain far too little magnesium to support healthy blood vessel function. To genuinely impact vascular health, higher well-absorbed forms like magnesium glycinate or magnesium malate are often necessary. Magnesium lays the foundation. It keeps blood vessels capable of relaxing and supports the biochemistry your kidneys need to manage sodium efficiently. But magnesium alone isn't enough. That's where the second hidden driver, insulin resistance, comes into play. Insulin is usually discussed in the context of blood sugar and diabetes. But it also has a direct role in blood pressure. Here's how. Insulin communicates with the kidneys, instructing them to retain sodium. In a healthy body, insulin rises after a meal, sends a short retention signal, then falls back to baseline. The kidneys then release the excess sodium, and everything resets cleanly. In someone with insulin resistance, baseline insulin remains chronically elevated. That means the kidneys receive the sodium retention signal all day, every day. Sodium accumulates, water follows, blood volume increases, and pressure stays elevated regardless of how little salt you eat. This explains why low-sodium diets often disappoint people. The issue isn't the salt coming in, it's the signal preventing it from leaving. Insulin resistance often overlaps with prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, and hypertension. The foods that drive chronically elevated insulin are familiar. White bread, white rice, pasta, sweetened beverages, and processed snacks. It's not about eliminating carbs entirely. It's about reducing refined carbs, spacing meals, and choosing options that produce moderate, brief insulin responses. Those changes alone can lower blood pressure significantly without touching sodium. Now, if you're following closely, you can start to see the picture forming. Magnesium keeps your vessels relaxed, insulin controls kidney sodium retention, and when one or both are off, pressure rises. But there's more. The third hidden driver adds another layer of complication. One most people never connect to blood pressure. That driver is elevated uric acid. You might only associate uric acid with gout, the painful joint condition. While gout is real, elevated uric acid also damages the cardiovascular system in ways completely separate from joint pain. Here's the mechanism. Consuming fructose, particularly in sweetened drinks and processed foods, increases uric acid. Unlike glucose, fructose metabolism produces uric acid directly, and repeated consumption drives levels higher over time. High uric acid blocks nitric oxide, the same molecule magnesium supports. Vessels can't relax fully, kidneys struggle to excrete sodium, and arteries become stiffer, less able to buffer pressure with each heartbeat. Combine that with magnesium deficiency and insulin resistance, and you've already got a system working against itself on multiple fronts. These first three drivers, magnesium, insulin, and uric acid, each contribute to elevated blood pressure, but together they compound the problem, making traditional sodium-focused approaches frustratingly ineffective. And that sets the stage for the fourth and most critical driver, the one that ties everything together, low potassium. But we'll dive into that in part 3, because understanding potassium fully will make everything about the first three drivers make perfect sense. Now that we've covered magnesium, insulin, and uric acid, It's time to talk about the fourth and most critical driver, low potassium. This is the hidden key that ties all the other factors together, and it's the one most often overlooked in discussions about high blood pressure. Potassium is the direct counterbalance to sodium in the body. These two minerals work in tandem, maintaining fluid balance, signaling the kidneys, and helping blood vessels relax. Without enough potassium, the system that regulates sodium, the system that keeps your blood pressure in check, cannot function properly. Here's how it works. Adequate potassium levels tell the kidneys to release sodium, water follows, blood volume drops slightly, and pressure eases. At the same time, potassium directly relaxes blood vessels, reducing vascular resistance independently of kidney function. It also calms the sympathetic nervous system, which controls stress responses like elevated heart rate and vessel constriction. Higher potassium means a calmer system, more relaxed vessels, and lower blood pressure. For most of human history, potassium intake was naturally high. Our ancestors ate diets rich in leafy greens, root vegetables, legumes, and whole fruits. Researchers estimate that humans evolved on a potassium to sodium ratio of roughly 10-1 in favor of potassium. That's the environment our kidneys and cardiovascular systems were optimized for. But modern diets have flipped that ratio almost completely. Processed and packaged foods are loaded with sodium, while potassium-rich foods are rare. This dietary shift creates a double burden: sodium excess and potassium deficiency, leaving the kidneys without the signal they need to release the sodium your body is retaining. Low potassium isn't about personal failure. It's about a mismatch between modern food and human physiology. Even people who eat healthy or whole food diets may not get enough potassium if their consumption of fruits, vegetables, and legumes is limited. Large population studies across decades and countries consistently show that higher potassium intake is associated with lower blood pressure and reduced cardiovascular risk. The evidence is clear. Potassium matters, and restoring it is powerful. Now, let's put the full picture together. Chronic high blood pressure is rarely about salt alone. It is a regulatory failure, driven by multiple metabolic factors. Here's how the system breaks down. Chronically elevated insulin tells your kidneys to retain sodium around the clock. Magnesium deficiency leaves blood vessels in mild chronic constriction. Elevated uric acid blocks nitric oxide, stiffens arteries, and further impairs sodium excretion. And low potassium prevents the kidneys from releasing sodium properly and weakens vessel relaxation. All four factors are acting in the same direction at once. This explains why simply removing sodium often produces underwhelming results. Even if you cut salt dramatically, the insulin signal continues to tell the kidneys to hold on to sodium, magnesium deficiency keeps vessels tight, uric acid blocks relaxation, and low potassium leaves the release system ineffective. That's why many people feel frustrated despite doing everything right by conventional advice. The solution isn't more restriction, it's targeting the real drivers. And here's the good news. All four drivers respond to dietary changes. None are permanent, irreversible states. They are the result of inputs, what you eat and drink. Change the inputs, and the body starts to adapt, restore balance, and lower blood pressure naturally. This is why high blood pressure should never feel hopeless. The mechanisms are still active, even after years of elevated readings. Your body is always responding to new information. It's dynamic, not fixed. To make this practical, let's outline a 3-0-day approach addressing all four drivers. Week 1 focuses on reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugars. This isn't about eliminating carbs entirely, but pulling back on white bread, pasta, rice, packaged snacks, and sweetened drinks. Doing this eases insulin levels, reducing the persistent sodium retention signal to your kidneys. Week 2 is about restoring potassium naturally. Focus on potassium-rich foods like sweet potatoes, avocados, leafy greens, lentils, and beans. These are low in sodium and high in potassium, the perfect combination for rebalancing your system. The goal isn't supplementation at this stage. It's food-based restoration, which is safer and more effective for most people. Week 3 shifts attention to magnesium. Include leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and legumes consistently. If using a supplement, forms like magnesium, glycinate, or malate are better absorbed than typical multivitamins. Magnesium supports vessel relaxation and helps the kidneys regulate sodium effectively. Week 4 targets uric acid. Avoid concentrated fructose sources, sweetened drinks, fruit juices, flavored teas. Replace them with water, sparkling water, or unsweetened alternatives. This reduces uric acid, restoring nitric oxide function, supporting vessel relaxation, and improving kidney sodium clearance. By following these 4 weekly steps, you address each hidden driver systematically. This is how the body begins to regulate itself again, rather than just masking the problem. You may notice changes before seeing a blood pressure reading drop: less head pressure, more stable energy, and fewer sudden surges in readings. These are signs the system is responding. By now, you can start to see how these hidden drivers don't just act in isolation, they interact and amplify each other, creating a pressure system working against you on multiple levels. Let's go back to insulin resistance, because this one is often the silent culprit behind stubborn high blood pressure. Most people think of insulin only in the context of blood sugar, but its role in regulating sodium in the kidneys is equally critical. When insulin is chronically elevated, which happens with refined carbs and added sugars, it keeps sending a persistent signal to your kidneys. Hold on to sodium. The kidneys never get a break to release the excess sodium. Water stays trapped in your bloodstream, and blood pressure remains elevated. This is why reducing salt alone rarely produces meaningful results. It's not the salt you're eating, it's the signal preventing your body from excreting the salt you already have. Now layer on magnesium deficiency. Without enough magnesium, your blood vessels are in a constant state of mild constriction, unable to fully relax. The arteries are narrower, resistance increases, and pressure rises, independent of sodium intake. Magnesium also supports nitric oxide production, the key relaxation signal. Without it, your vessels don't get the message to open up. Next, consider uric acid, which adds a second separate complication. Fructose from sweetened beverages, fruit juices, and processed foods raises uric acid levels. High uric acid blocks nitric oxide, stiffens arterial walls, and further impairs the kidney's ability to excrete sodium. Now your body is facing 3 simultaneous pressures: insulin telling the kidneys to hold sodium, magnesium deficiency keeping vessels tight, and uric acid interfering with nitric oxide and vessel elasticity. This is why chronic high blood pressure can persist, even in people who eat a healthy diet or take medications faithfully. The system is compromised at multiple points, not just by salt. Understanding this interplay is critical. When these drivers are addressed together, blood pressure responds in ways it rarely does with conventional approaches. And then we return to potassium, the 4th and most critical factor. Low potassium is not just another nutrient deficiency, it is the signal your kidneys rely on to release sodium. Without adequate potassium, the sodium retention caused by insulin and compounded by uric acid cannot be corrected. Blood vessels remain tight, arteries stay stiff, and the pressure system is essentially stuck in overdrive. Potassium restores balance, both by signaling sodium release and directly relaxing vessels. Let's visualize this. Imagine your circulatory system as a set of interconnected pipes. Insulin is a faucet that's constantly running, keeping the pipes full. Magnesium is the elasticity of the pipes themselves, too little, and the walls are rigid. Uric acid is sludge blocking the pipes, further restricting flow. Potassium is the valve that releases the excess fluid. When potassium is low, the valve won't open, and the pressure keeps building even if you try to reduce water, sodium, entering the system. Now think about modern diets. Most processed foods are high in sodium and low in potassium, and sugary drinks spike insulin and uric acid simultaneously. The combination is perfect for creating chronic high blood pressure. This isn't a failure of willpower. It's biology interacting with the modern food environment. It's not about guilt. It's about understanding why your body responds the way it does. Here's the encouraging part. All 4 drivers, insulin, magnesium, uric acid, and potassium, are modifiable through dietary changes and lifestyle adjustments. The body is dynamic, responsive, and capable of restoring balance even after years of elevated blood pressure. Unlike medications that often mask symptoms, addressing these root causes allows your system to self-regulate naturally. For example, reducing refined carbohydrates lowers insulin levels, easing the sodium retention signal. Increasing magnesium-rich foods helps vessels relax and supports nitric oxide production. Cutting sugary drinks lowers uric acid, removing its block on vessel relaxation and kidney function. and restoring potassium through whole foods gives the kidneys the signal to release sodium properly. Each step addresses one piece of the system, but together, they create a synergistic effect that can produce meaningful reductions in blood pressure. Understanding this interplay also explains why traditional advice just cut salt often fails. Salt restriction alone doesn't fix insulin resistance, magnesium deficiency, uric acid overload, or potassium deficiency. It only scratches the surface. The true solution is systemic, addressing the root metabolic drivers simultaneously. By the end of this process, the body begins to respond with measurable improvements. Less pressure in the head, more consistent energy, fewer spikes in blood pressure, and vessels that can finally relax and accommodate the flow of blood naturally. This is how high blood pressure, even after years of stubborn readings, can be meaningfully reduced without drastic measures or extreme restriction. Now that you understand the 4 hidden drivers: magnesium deficiency, insulin resistance, elevated uric acid, and low potassium, let's translate that knowledge into a practical, step-by-step 30-day approach that can start to reset your blood pressure naturally. This isn't about extreme restrictions or fad diets. It's about making focused, achievable changes that work together to address the root causes. Week 1. Reduce refined carbohydrates and added sugars. This is your starting point because insulin resistance is often the foundation of sodium retention. Pull back on white bread, white rice, pasta, packaged snacks, and sweetened beverages. You don't need to eliminate every carb immediately, but aim to make meaningful reductions. The goal is to give your insulin levels a chance to drop and stay lower between meals. When insulin declines, your kidneys begin to release sodium more efficiently, and your blood volume starts to normalize. Even small, consistent reductions in refined carbs can produce noticeable improvements in energy levels and post-meal pressure surges within the first week. Week 2. Add potassium-rich whole foods. Potassium is the signal your kidneys need to release sodium. Focus on foods naturally high in potassium and low in sodium. Sweet potatoes, avocados, cooked leafy greens, lentils, kidney beans, and white beans. These foods help restore the balance your body evolved for and support both vascular relaxation and kidney function. The goal isn't aggressive supplementation yet, it's about restoring a dietary balance stripped away by modern processed foods. When potassium levels improve, the kidneys respond by letting go of excess sodium, and you'll begin to notice subtle drops in blood pressure and more stable hydration. Week 3. Focus on magnesium intake. Magnesium supports blood vessel relaxation, nitric oxide production, and overall kidney function. Include leafy greens, almonds, pumpkin seeds, black beans, and other magnesium-rich foods consistently in your meals. If you feel you need a supplement, opt for forms like magnesium glycinate or magnesium malate, which are better absorbed than magnesium oxide commonly found in standard multivitamins. Adequate magnesium reduces vascular tension and helps the kidneys manage sodium more efficiently, amplifying the effects of the changes you made in weeks 1 and 2. Week 4. Address elevated uric acid by cutting concentrated fructose. This includes sweetened beverages, commercial fruit juices, flavored teas, and sports drinks. Many people underestimate how much fructose they consume through drinks rather than food. Replacing these with water, sparkling water, or unsweetened alternatives can significantly lower uric acid levels, allowing nitric oxide to function properly, arteries to relax, and kidneys to excrete sodium more effectively. Even if you've been careful with sugar and food, beverages are often the hidden source driving uric acid elevation. During this 30-day approach, check your blood pressure twice a week rather than daily. Daily readings can create unnecessary stress and misrepresent trends due to natural fluctuations with activity, stress, and time of day. Monitoring twice a week provides a clear picture of genuine progress. Over the month, many people notice physical changes before seeing dramatic shifts in numbers. Less head pressure, reduced facial flushing after meals, steadier energy levels, and fewer sudden surges from stress. These are real physiological indicators that the body is beginning to regulate itself again. It's important to understand that even if your blood pressure has been elevated for years, your body is still responsive. The kidneys still react to potassium, vessels still respond to magnesium and nitric oxide, and insulin can normalize with reduced refined carbohydrates. Improvements may take longer in long-standing cases, but the mechanisms are active and adaptable at any age. By systematically addressing all four drivers, you're not just masking symptoms, you're correcting the root causes. Each driver contributes a piece of the puzzle, and together they create a synergistic effect that can produce meaningful, sustainable reductions in blood pressure. Remember, this approach isn't a replacement for medical care if you have existing health conditions or are on blood pressure medications. Always consult your physician before making significant dietary changes, especially if you have kidney disease or other cardiovascular concerns. But for most people with moderately elevated blood pressure, these changes are safe, effective, and transformative. By the end of this 30-day framework, the cumulative effect of reducing insulin-driving foods, restoring potassium and magnesium, and controlling uric acid begins to retrain your body's blood pressure regulation system. This is how real long-term improvements are achieved not through temporary fixes, but through addressing the metabolic drivers at their source. By now, you've set the stage for your body to begin regulating blood pressure more effectively. But what can you realistically expect as you move through this 30-day framework? One of the most encouraging things is that your body often gives physical feedback before the numbers on the cuff change dramatically. For example, many people report less pressure or fullness in the head, especially after meals. That sensation of tension or mild throbbing is often a direct result of excess sodium and water lingering in the bloodstream due to the insulin, magnesium, uric acid, and potassium imbalances we discussed. As your body begins to release sodium efficiently and your vessels relax, these sensations diminish. Another common change is reduced facial flushing, particularly after eating. Flushing can be a subtle indicator that your vascular system is under strain. When magnesium levels improve and nitric oxide can do its job, blood vessels dilate more appropriately, and the face and early warning sight for elevated pressure stabilizes. You may also notice more consistent energy throughout the day, without the sudden spikes and crashes that often accompany high insulin levels or high uric acid. Those swings are tied to both metabolic stress and fluctuating blood pressure. As your system begins to balance itself, energy levels normalize, giving you a steady, even rhythm rather than a roller coaster pattern. Some people notice fewer intense surges in blood pressure during stressful moments. This is directly linked to potassium's effect on the sympathetic nervous system. Higher potassium levels calm the fight or flight response in the cardiovascular system, helping vessels stay relaxed and heart rate remain more stable. Even if stress levels remain unchanged, the physiological impact of stress is reduced. All of these physical signals are important because they reflect real improvements in your regulatory system. They're signs that your kidneys are clearing sodium more effectively, your blood vessels are relaxing, and the system of insulin, magnesium, uric acid, and potassium is finally beginning to work in harmony. These changes often appear within weeks, even before noticeable reductions in your blood pressure readings, which can be a huge motivator to stay consistent with the plan. Consistency is key. The system we're addressing didn't become imbalanced overnight. Years of poor dietary patterns, refined carbohydrates, processed foods, and low intake of potassium and magnesium created a chronic environment where blood pressure could rise. Reversing that process takes repeated, sustained actions. Missing a day here or there won't erase progress, but skipping steps consistently will slow results and limit the body's ability to adapt. It's also important to remember that blood pressure readings fluctuate naturally throughout the day. Activity, posture, stress, and even hydration can cause variations. That's why I recommend checking your blood pressure twice a week, rather than obsessively every day. This helps you focus on the trend rather than getting caught up in temporary spikes or dips. Over the 30-day period, if you follow the steps for reducing refined carbs, restoring potassium, supporting magnesium, and controlling uric acid, you should begin to see a downward trend that is both measurable and meaningful. If you've been managing high blood pressure for years, it's normal to feel skeptical. Many people assume that after a decade or more of elevated readings, the body's systems are locked in and lifestyle changes won't help. That assumption is not accurate. Your kidneys still respond to potassium today. Your blood vessels still respond to magnesium and nitric oxide. Your insulin levels still respond to dietary changes. It may take a bit longer to see the full effect, but the mechanisms remain dynamic and responsive, no matter your age or history. Finally, remember that high blood pressure is a signal, not a permanent sentence. It signals a regulatory system under stress, and every measurable reduction, even modest, reduces cumulative wear on the heart and arteries. Addressing the root causes, rather than just masking symptoms with sodium restriction, allows your body to relearn balance and resilience, giving you genuine control over your cardiovascular health. By this point, you've learned the 4 hidden drivers of high blood pressure and a step-by-step approach to address them. But it's important to tackle common misconceptions that keep people stuck in cycles of frustration. One of the biggest myths is that blood pressure is solely about salt intake. Many people have spent years obsessively cutting sodium, reading labels, avoiding restaurants, and turning down foods they love, only to see minimal changes on the monitor. If this sounds familiar, it's not your fault. You were targeting a symptom, not the underlying cause. Another frequent misconception is that high blood pressure is simply a consequence of aging. While blood pressure tends to rise with age in the population, this is not an inevitable biological process. Chronic hypertension is almost always the result of small, compounding metabolic stresses that accumulate over time. It's not a random decline. It's a system under pressure from predictable, identifiable drivers. That means it can be addressed with targeted interventions. Medication is another area where misconceptions arise. Many people assume that once they start antihypertensive drugs, lifestyle changes become secondary. While medications are sometimes necessary, they mask symptoms rather than correct the underlying metabolic imbalances. Relying solely on medication without addressing magnesium deficiency, insulin resistance, uric acid elevation, and low potassium is like patching a leak without fixing the source of the water. True. Sustainable improvement comes from restoring your body's natural regulatory system. Let's also address the subtle pitfall of overemphasizing individual nutrients in isolation. Cutting salt alone is rarely effective, and taking a single supplement without improving diet and metabolic health will only produce modest results. The 4 drivers work together in a complex system. Addressing them systematically, reducing refined carbs, restoring potassium, supporting magnesium, and controlling uric acid produces a cumulative effect far greater than any single change. Consistency over time is another critical factor. The body didn't develop these imbalances overnight, and reversing them requires sustained input adjustments. Skipping days or weeks can slow progress, but small, consistent actions accumulate, retraining your kidneys, vessels, and metabolic system to function as they were designed. This is why a structured, stepwise approach like the 3-0-day framework is so effective. It creates habits that reinforce healthy regulation rather than temporary fixes. Another common mistake is focusing too much on short-term readings. Daily fluctuations in blood pressure are normal, influenced by stress, hydration, activity, and sleep. Obsessing over each reading can create unnecessary anxiety and mislead you about your progress. Checking your blood pressure twice a week gives a reliable trend without the distraction of minor fluctuations, allowing you to see genuine improvements as the body adapts. It's also worth mentioning a psychological barrier. Many people assume that after years of elevated blood pressure, their body has lost the ability to recover. That is simply not true. The kidneys still respond to potassium, blood vessels still respond to magnesium, nitric oxide pathways are still active, and insulin levels respond to dietary changes. Improvements may be gradual, but they are real and cumulative. Every small reduction lowers the strain on your heart and arteries and sets the stage for further progress. Finally, one of the most overlooked strategies for long-term success is integration rather than isolation. The 4 drivers don't operate independently, they interact, amplify, and reinforce each other. Addressing all 4 together produces a synergistic effect. Reducing insulin improves sodium handling, potassium amplifies kidney function, magnesium relaxes vessels, and lowering uric acid restores nitric oxide function. Focusing on just 1 or 2 of these factors leaves the system partially unaddressed, which is why many people struggle despite good intentions. The takeaway here is simple but powerful. High blood pressure is a reversible signal of regulatory stress, not an inevitable decline or a punishment for dietary choices. By understanding the hidden metabolic drivers and addressing them systematically, you can restore balance, reduce blood pressure, and improve overall cardiovascular resilience. Consistency, awareness, and targeted interventions are the keys. Once you've addressed the 4 hidden drivers, the next step is maintaining those improvements for the long term. High blood pressure isn't a one-time fix. It's a signal that your regulatory system needs consistent support. To keep your kidneys, vessels, and metabolic pathways functioning optimally, it's essential to integrate these changes into daily habits. Start by making whole foods the foundation of your diet. Leafy greens, legumes, root vegetables, nuts, seeds, and fruits in their whole form. These foods naturally provide magnesium and potassium, support nitric oxide production, and reduce insulin spikes. Minimize refined carbohydrates and added sugars, not just for a month, but as a permanent strategy to keep insulin signaling in balance. Monitor your beverage choices carefully, avoiding concentrated fructose from juices, sweetened teas, and sodas, which drive uric acid and impair sodium excretion. Replace them with water or unsweetened drinks. Consistency matters more than perfection. Even small, sustained changes compound over weeks and months. Check your blood pressure twice a week to track trends, not daily fluctuations, and celebrate the physical signs of improvement. More stable energy, less head pressure, fewer surges after stress, and vessels that finally relax naturally. When these habits become routine, you're no longer managing symptoms, you're restoring the system your body was designed to maintain. By now, you've learned how to correct the 4 hidden drivers of high blood pressure, magnesium deficiency, insulin resistance, elevated uric acid, and low potassium, and how to implement changes that restore balance. But knowledge alone isn't enough. The key to lasting results is sustaining these corrections over time. Think of your body like a finely tuned instrument. It responds beautifully when the right inputs are provided. But old patterns, high sugar intake, low potassium, and inadequate magnesium can slowly creep back if you're not vigilant. That's why long-term maintenance is critical. Consistency in diet and lifestyle is not optional. It's essential. Whole, unprocessed foods, potassium-rich vegetables, magnesium sources like nuts and seeds, and minimized refined sugars must remain a staple, not a temporary intervention. Lifestyle factors beyond diet also play a role. Regular physical activity, stress management, and adequate sleep all support kidney function, improve insulin sensitivity, and help regulate blood pressure naturally. Even moderate exercise, like walking or cycling, improves vascular flexibility and enhances nitric oxide production. Stress reduction, through meditation, breathing exercises, or mindfulness, decreases sympathetic nervous system activity, preventing unnecessary spikes in heart rate and pressure. Monitoring your progress is equally important. Continue checking your blood pressure twice a week and track trends over months, not days. Celebrate improvements in physical signs, such as more stable energy, reduced head pressure, and fewer post-meal surges. These subtle cues are your body signaling that the system is adapting and responding correctly. Ultimately, the goal is not temporary control, it's long-term restoration of your body's natural regulatory system. By addressing the root metabolic causes and reinforcing healthy habits consistently, you reduce strain on your arteries, improve cardiovascular resilience, and regain control over your health. As we wrap up this series, it's important to reflect on the big picture. High blood pressure is rarely just about the salt on your plate. It's a signal, a message from your body that your regulatory systems are under stress. The good news is that this signal can be addressed. By understanding and correcting the 4 hidden drivers: magnesium deficiency, insulin resistance, elevated uric acid, and low potassium, you are treating the root causes rather than masking the symptoms. The 30-day framework we've discussed is more than a temporary reset. It's a foundation for a long-term, sustainable approach. By reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugars, restoring potassium and magnesium through whole foods, and eliminating concentrated fructose from beverages, you give your body the tools it needs to regulate sodium, relax blood vessels, and lower pressure naturally. These changes are measurable and impactful, and over time they improve not just blood pressure readings, but overall cardiovascular resilience, energy, and well-being. Consistency is key. Long-term success comes from integrating these habits into your daily routine, monitoring your progress, and adjusting as needed. Remember that physical feedback, steady energy, reduced head pressure, calmer responses to stress is as meaningful as the numbers on a cuff. If you followed along with this series and found the insights valuable, take the next step. Commit to the 30-day framework, track your trends, and share your experience. Knowledge is powerful, but action is transformative. And if you want a deeper dive into the metabolic foundations of long-term cardiovascular health, check out the longevity guide linked below. It provides a complete, evidence-based framework to help you maintain and enhance these results for life. Your blood pressure is not a sentence, it's a signal. When you address the real drivers and give your body the right inputs, you can restore balance, reclaim control, and support your heart in a way that lasts. Take control today, follow the framework, and let your body do what it was designed to do.